The rain slammed against the window, a relentless drumbeat that matched the pounding in my chest. I stood in the doorway of our Brooklyn apartment, the air thick with the scent of damp wool and betrayal. My husband, Caleb, was sprawled on the couch, his phone glowing in his hand, illuminating his face in a way that made him look like a stranger. His thumb hovered over the screen, frozen, as if he knew I'd seen the messages. The ones he thought he'd deleted, the ones that burned into my brain. Last night was wild. When can I see you again? From someone named Jay. Not me. Never me. My name's Jonah, and I'm the idiot who thought forever meant something. I didn't scream. I wanted to, God knows, but my voice came out low, jagged, like broken glass. Who is she, Caleb? His eyes flicked up, wide, guilty, and for a second, I saw the boy I'd fallen for 5 years ago at a dive bar in Williamsburg, all crooked smiles and promises. But that boy was gone, replaced by this man who couldn't even look at me. He stammered, "It's not what you think." But the lie hung heavy, like the stale coffee smell clinging to the air. I didn't wait for more. I grabbed my jacket, the leather creaking under my grip, and walked out into the storm, the door slamming shut behind me like a gunshot. The city was alive. Even at midnight, neon lights bleeding into puddles on the sidewalk. My boots splashed through them, each step a pulse of anger, hurt, confusion. We'd been married 2 years, together for 5, and I'd spent every day building a life with him. Our tiny apartment filled with mismatched mugs, vinyl records, and dreams of a future we'd whispered about under the sheets. Now it was unraveling, and I didn't know how to stop it. My phone buzzed in my pocket, Caleb's name flashing. I ignored it, the vibration like a wasp trapped in my hand. I needed air, space, anything but the suffocating weight of his betrayal. I ended up at the Rusty Anchor, a bar I hadn't been to since that night I met Caleb. The place hadn't changed. Same sticky floors, same jukebox crooning Springsteen, same bartender with a beard like a lumberjack's. I slid onto a stool, the wood creaking under me, and ordered a whiskey, neat. The burn of it down my throat was the first real thing I'd felt since I saw those texts. That's when I noticed him. He was at the end of the bar, nursing a beer. His broad shoulders hunched like he was carrying something heavy too. Gray streaked his hair, and his face had lines that told stories, not just years. He looked up, and our eyes locked. Mine raw, his steady, like he'd seen storms like mine before. Rough night. His voice was low, warm, like gravel smoothed by a river. I laughed, bitter, and raised my glass. You could say that. He slid closer, his presence filling the space between us, and I caught the faint scent of cedar and smoke on him. His name was Marcus, and he didn't push, didn't pry, just sat there, listening as I spilled it all, Caleb, the texts, the way my world was cracking open. Marcus didn't flinch, didn't offer empty platitudes. He just nodded, his eyes holding mine, and said, "Sometimes people break things they don't know how to fix." We talked until the bar emptied out, the jukebox silent, the bartender wiping down the counter with a rag that smelled faintly of bleach. Marcus was older, maybe mid-40s, a photographer who'd spent years capturing moments. Weddings, protests, quiet mornings in places I'd never been. He had this way of talking, deliberate, like every word was a brushstroke. When he laughed, it was soft, like he was surprised by it, and it made something in my chest loosen. I didn't notice the time until the bartender called last call, and Marcus offered to walk me home. I said no, but he insisted, his hand brushing mine as we stepped into the rain-soaked street. A touch so brief it felt like a spark. The walk was quiet, the city humming around us. Car horns, distant sirens, the soft patter of rain on my hood. Marcus didn't fill the silence with chatter, and I was grateful. At my building, I turned to say goodbye, but his eyes caught mine again, and I felt it. A pull, like gravity, dangerous and undeniable. "You don't have to go back in there tonight," he said, his voice barely above the rain. I froze, my heart stuttering. He wasn't asking me to stay with him, not like that, but the offer hung there, an escape from the wreckage waiting upstairs. I shook my head, mumbled something about needing to face it, and watched him walk away, his silhouette swallowed by the dark. Upstairs, Caleb was awake, pacing, his hair a mess from running his hands through it. "Jonah, please," he started. But I cut him off. "Don't. Just tell me who Jay is." His face crumpled, and the truth came out in fragments. A guy from work, a fling. It didn't mean anything. Each word was a knife twisting deeper. I didn't cry, not then. I just sat on the couch, staring at the coffee table where we'd carved our initials one drunken night, and wondered how we got here. Caleb begged, promised it was over, but his voice sounded hollow, like an echo of someone I used to know. I didn't sleep that night, the rain still drumming, my mind replaying Marcus's steady gaze, the way he'd listened without judgment. The next morning, I left before Caleb woke up, his snores filling the apartment like a taunt. I wandered, aimless, until I ended up at a gallery in Dumbo, drawn by a flyer I'd seen at the bar. Marcus's name was on it. Inside, his photographs lined the walls, black and white shots of people caught in raw moments. A couple dancing in the rain, a kid chasing a pigeon, a man staring out a window, his face etched with longing. I felt him before I saw him, that cedar and smoke scent cutting through the gallery's sterile air. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, a smile tugging at his lips. My stomach flipped, and I hated myself for it. I was married, broken or not, and this man, this stranger, was a complication I didn't need. But we talked again about his work, about the way he saw the world through a lens, finding beauty in the cracks. He asked about me, not Caleb, and for the first time in months I felt seen. Not as a husband, not as a failure, just Jonah. When he invited me to grab coffee, I said yes, ignoring the voice in my head screaming that this was dangerous. We sat at a corner table, steam rising from our cups, and he told me about his life. Divorced, no kids, a man who'd spent years running from attachments until he learned to stop. "You don't have to stay in a place that hurts you," he said, his hand resting on the table, close enough to feel the warmth of it. I wanted to reach out, to bridge that gap, but I didn't. Not yet. That night, I came home to Caleb cooking dinner, an apology in every chop of the knife. He tried to touch me, his hand grazing my arm, but it felt wrong, like a memory that didn't fit anymore. I pulled away, and his face fell, the silence between us louder than the rain ever was. I thought about Marcus, about the way his presence felt like a lifeline, and I wondered if I was falling or just waking up. The days blurred into a haze of avoidance and ache. Caleb tried, God, he tried, leaving notes on the fridge, cooking my favorite meals, even suggesting couples therapy. But every gesture felt like a performance, a desperate grab to keep me from slipping away. I'd catch him watching me, his eyes pleading, but all I could see were those texts, the ones that shattered the life we'd built. I started spending more time out, wandering Brooklyn's streets, the city's pulse syncing with my own restless heart. The air carried the sharp tang of fall, leaves crunching underfoot, and every corner seemed to whisper Marcus's name. I ran into him again at the gallery, though I'd be lying if I said it was an accident. I'd started checking the flyer, memorizing his exhibit schedule like a guilty secret. This time, he was adjusting a frame, his sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms dusted with dark hair and a faint scar that curved like a question mark. He saw me and grinned, not the polished smile of someone trying to impress, but something raw, unguarded. "You're making a habit of this," he teased, and I laughed, the sound surprising me. We ended up walking to a nearby park, the kind with old oaks and benches etched with lovers' initials. The wind carried the faint hum of traffic, and I could smell the earth, damp from last night's rain. Marcus didn't ask about Caleb, and I didn't offer. Instead, we talked about everything else, his first camera, a beat-up Nikon he'd bought at a flea market, my job as a graphic designer, where I spent hours tweaking fonts to avoid thinking about home. He had this way of listening, head tilted, eyes locked on mine, like I was the only thing in the frame. When a leaf fell into my hair, he reached out to brush it away, his fingers lingering a second too long. My breath caught, And I saw it in his eyes too. That spark, that dangerous pull. I stepped back, muttering something about work, and he let me go. But his gaze followed me like a shadow. That night, Caleb was waiting, his face tight with something new. Suspicion. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice sharp, like he'd been rehearsing the question. I shrugged, too tired to lie, too raw to fight. "Out," I said, and the word landed like a stone. He didn't push, but the air between us crackled, charged with unspoken accusations. I slept on the couch, the springs digging into my back, and dreamed of Marcus's hands, steady and sure, framing a world where I didn't feel broken. The next twist came unannounced, like a crack in the pavement you don't see until you trip. I was at a coffee shop, sketching in my notebook, when a guy slid into the seat across from me. He was lean, sharp-jawed, with eyes that glittered like he knew something I didn't. "You're Jonah, right?" he said, and my stomach dropped. He introduced himself as Jamie J., the guy from Caleb's texts. My coffee went cold in my hand as he leaned in, voice low, conspiratorial. "Caleb's been lying to both of us," he said, and the words hit like a punch. Jamie wasn't just a fling. He thought he was in a relationship, thought Caleb was single. The betrayal doubled, a kaleidoscope of lies spinning out of control. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh. Jamie kept talking, his voice a mix of anger and hurt, but all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. He showed me texts, photos, proof that Caleb had been juggling us both, building separate lives like a house of cards. When he left, I sat there, staring at my sketch, a half-finished outline of Marcus's face, all sharp angles and quiet strength. I tore it out, crumpled it, but didn't throw it away. It felt like the only real thing I had left. I confronted Caleb that night, my voice shaking but steady. He didn't deny it, not this time. He just stood there, head bowed, as I laid out every piece of the truth Jamie had given me. "I was scared," he whispered, and I wanted to believe him, wanted to find the man I'd married in the wreckage of his words. But all I could see was the lie, the choice he'd made over and over. I walked out again, the doors slam echoing in my bones, and found myself at Marcus's studio, a converted loft in Red Hook. I hadn't planned it, but my feet knew the way. He opened the door, surprise flickering across his face before it softened into something else. Concern, maybe, or something deeper. The loft smelled of developer chemicals and old wood, and his camera sat on a table, lens catching the light. I didn't mean to cry, but the tears came anyway, hot and unstoppable. Marcus didn't say anything, just pulled me into a hug, his arms solid, grounding. I could feel his heartbeat, steady against my cheek, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was drowning. "You're enough, Jonah," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You always were." We stayed like that, the city humming outside, the weight of his words sinking in. I wanted to stay, to let this moment stretch forever, but the ring on my finger felt like a brand. I pulled back, my breath uneven, and saw the question in his eyes. "I can't," I said, the words tasting like ash. He nodded, like he'd expected it, but his hand lingered on mine, a silent promise. I left, the night air sharp against my skin, and wondered if I was running from Caleb or toward something I wasn't ready to name. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk, every step a choice between holding on and letting go. Caleb and I were strangers in our own home, sharing space but not lives. He'd stopped trying to fix things, his apologies replaced by a resigned silence that hurt more than his lies. I kept working, sketching, losing myself in lines and curves, but Marcus was there, in every shadow, every quiet moment. His number was in my phone now, a dangerous temptation I hadn't deleted. I'd catch myself staring at it, thumb hovering, the memory of his arms around me like a ghost that wouldn't leave. One evening, I found myself back at the Rusty Anchor, the jukebox playing some mournful Tom Waits song that matched the ache in my chest. Marcus was there, like he'd been waiting, though I knew he wasn't. He was talking to a woman, her laughter bright, her hand on his arm. Jealousy hit me like a wave, sharp and irrational, and I hated myself for it. I was married, broken or not, and I had no right to feel this way. But when he saw me, he excused himself, crossing the bar with that steady stride, his eyes finding mine like they always did. "You okay?" he asked, and I shook my head, too raw to lie. We ended up outside, leaning against the brick wall, the air cool and thick with the smell of rain-soaked asphalt. I told him about Jamie, about Caleb's double life, about the way I felt like I was disappearing. Marcus listened, his shoulder brushing mine, and when I finished, he didn't offer solutions or pity. He just said, "You're not invisible, Jonah. Not to me." The words landed soft, like a hand on my heart, and I felt that pull again, stronger now, undeniable. I turned to him, our faces close, and for a moment, I thought I'd kiss him. The air crackled, electric, but I pulled back, my breath shaky. "I'm not ready," I whispered, and he nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. The next day, Caleb dropped a bomb. He was leaving for a work trip, a week in Chicago, and he wanted me to come. "We can start over," he said, his voice desperate, like he was grasping at the last threads of us. I wanted to say no, to tell him it was too late, but something in his eyes, the same eyes I'd fallen for all those years ago, made me hesitate. I agreed, not because I believed in us, but because I needed to know if there was anything left to save. Chicago was a blur of cold wind and crowded streets, the kind of city that felt alive even in its chaos. Caleb tried to be the man I'd married, holding my hand, pointing out buildings like we were tourists on a first date. But every touch felt like an echo, every smile forced. At night, in our hotel room, he reached for me, his hands tentative, but I turned away, the space between us a chasm too wide to cross. I lay awake, listening to his breathing, and thought of Marcus, his steady gaze, the way he saw me, really saw me. The twist came on the third day. I was at a cafe, sketching while Caleb was at a meeting, when my phone buzzed. A text from Jamie. "He's not in Chicago for work. Check his email." My heart sank, but I did it, hacking into Caleb's account with a password he hadn't bothered to change. There it was, confirmation for a dinner reservation, a hotel booking, all for him and someone else. Not Jamie. Someone new. The betrayal wasn't a knife this time. It was a tidal wave, washing away the last of my hope. I packed my bag, left a note, "I'm done," and caught the next flight back to New York. I went straight to Marcus's loft, my hands shaking as I knocked. He opened the door, concern etching his face, and I didn't stop to think. I kissed him hard, desperate, the taste of him like whiskey and home. He kissed me back, his hands framing my face, and for the first time in months, I felt alive. We stumbled inside, the door clicking shut, and the world narrowed to just us. The cedar scent of him, the rough texture of his shirt, the way his breath hitched when I touched him. But as we pulled apart, panting, guilt crashed in. "I'm still married," I whispered, and Marcus nodded, his thumb brushing my cheek. "I know," he said, "but I'm here when you're ready." I left, the city spinning around me, my heart torn between the man I'd promised forever to and the one who made me feel like forever was possible again. I didn't go home. I checked into a cheap motel, the kind with flickering lights and thin walls, and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The rain started again, a soft patter against the window, and I let myself cry, the sound swallowed by the storm. The motel room smelled of mildew and regret, the kind of place where dreams went to die. I stayed there for days, avoiding Caleb's calls, his texts, his voicemails that ranged from pleading to angry to broken. Each one was a reminder of what we'd lost, but also of what I'd found, myself, or at least the pieces I was starting to put back together. Marcus didn't push, didn't text, but I felt him in the quiet moments, his presence a steady hum beneath the chaos. I knew I had to face Caleb to end things properly, but the thought of it made my stomach churn. I met Caleb at a diner, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like burnt promises. He looked wrecked, his eyes bloodshot, his hands fidgeting with a napkin. "I messed up, Jonah," he said, his voice raw. I love you. I always have. I wanted to believe him, wanted to find the man who'd danced with me in our kitchen, who'd laughed at my terrible puns. But all I saw was the lie, the choices he'd made, the way he'd chosen lust over loyalty again and again. It's over, I said, the words heavy but final. He cried, and I didn't. I walked out, the bell above the door jingling like a full stop. I found Marcus at the gallery, setting up for a new exhibit. The air was thick with the scent of fresh paint and possibility. He didn't ask what happened, didn't need to. He just handed me a coffee, his fingers brushing mine, and we sat among his photographs, the world quiet except for the hum of the city outside. What now? He asked, and I didn't have an answer, not yet, but I knew I wanted to find out with him. The high came weeks later, at a rooftop party Marcus invited me to. The city sprawled below us, a glittering mess of lights and dreams. We danced, his hands on my waist, the music pulsing through us like a heartbeat. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months, and when he kissed me under the stars, it felt like a beginning. But the twist wasn't over. Jamie was there, his eyes sharp, his smile bitter. He cornered me, his voice low. "You're moving on fast," he said, and I saw the hurt, the mirror of my own. I didn't owe him an explanation, but I gave one anyway. "I'm not running," I said. "I'm choosing me." He nodded, like he understood, and walked away, his silhouette fading into the crowd. Later, Marcus and I stood at the edge of the roof, the wind carrying the scent of rain and freedom. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He took my hand, his grip steady, and said, "Good. That means it's real. We didn't talk about forever, didn't make promises we couldn't keep." But in that moment, with the city alive below us and his hand in mine, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope, not the fragile kind that breaks under pressure, but the kind that grows in the cracks, stubborn and fierce. I wasn't healed, not yet. The scars of Caleb's betrayal would linger, a reminder of what I'd lost. But as I looked at Marcus, his face lit by the city's glow, I knew I was ready to build something new. Not a perfect love, but a real one, built on honesty, on seeing each other, on choosing each other every day. The rain started again, soft at first, then heavier, and we didn't move, letting it soak us through. It felt like a baptism, a washing away of the past, a promise of something better. I tilted my face to the sky, the drops cool against my skin, and for the first time, I believed I could be enough.